This is the story of Portal version 2, my latest sound art installation where I created a room full of vibrating mylar panels, kind of like an infinity room, but one that you can't really even see your own reflection. I'm going to tell you how I did it in today's video. Welcome to Kirsten Angerbauer Studio. So I'm basically just going to watch the B-roll that I've cut together and tell you a little bit about this build and some of the behind the scenes thoughts that I was having as I completed this project. This was the second time that I had installed my Portal installation, the first time being at Currents 2023 New Media Festival in the summer. I learned a lot from that installation and I took a lot of the mistakes that I made in that version forward with me as I created this new version. In this version of Portal, I decided to strip off the fabric panels that originally enclosed the outside of the piece and make it entirely open to the viewer from both sides. I also made these little pedestal boxes. You can see me here using my CNC router to cut all the details out of the boxes. Those boxes not only served as a display, an informational tile about the work, they also housed all the electronics and the cables and the power supply. Another thing I did to prep for this piece was create these little corner brackets that were going to hold the pieces of the structure into the L configuration. I really enjoy custom metal work, so I use my plasma cutter and the bench brake, a little bit of welding and angle grinding, and I made these super nice, cute little corner brackets that looked really simple and performed a simple but crucial function in the final build. Once all the prep was done, I went to the location where the gallery was at and I loaded up all of the materials from the truck onto carts and rolled it down to the gallery. There was a lot of back and forth trips, but in the end, I got all of the pieces down to the gallery and was ready to begin the install. Once I got down to the gallery, I unloaded all of my supplies and hardware and tools and double checked that everything that I needed was there and that I could visually see it. That's how I like to set up installs. I like to be able to see everything that I brought and know where it's laid out so that I can more easily know where I'm going and what my next steps are. I started this build by assembling the big 2x6 frames that make up the structure of the sculpture. There were 6 frames that had to be assembled for this build, and I found that the easiest way to do this was by pre-drilling Kreg jig pocket holes and just screwing them together on site. The fact that there are 6 frames for this piece meant that everything I did in this install and even in designing the work had to be repeated 6 times. The process went really smoothly, but it was a little bit tedious and it took some time to make sure all the frames were assembled correctly. Once I got the frames together, I screwed on those custom corner brackets that I had made earlier, and this was the element that was going to hold these into the L configuration. This particular structure doesn't need to support a lot of weight, it just needs to support the weight of itself and the frames. And so once they were clamped together, I could use a socket wrench and the bolts to bolt the frames together into the final configuration. I wanted it to be not perpendicular to the lines of the building and the architectural kind of detailing within the gallery, so I put it at kind of an angled slant. wanted anyone who approached it to be able to walk through it and appreciate that newness of the experience that is created. After assembling the frames, I moved on to adding in all the electronic components into the bottom of the sculpture. This included one speaker per panel, and the speaker is set to vibrate at a really low frequency, and that low frequency creates the vibrations that move up the mylar panels. So it's really important that these little speaker housings have little rubber feet on them that prevent the vibrations from going into the wood frames and actually making those vibrate in a way that, sounds like clicky and doesn't sound very good. Not only do the speakers have little rubber feet, but the frames themselves have rubber feet on the bottom, and everything is kind of designed so that the vibrations only translate up to the material they're supposed to and don't accidentally travel around and make little buzzing sounds on the piece. The other thing that I had to fit in these lower channels were the LED lights, and so I made sure to carefully run the lights through all of the holes and run the cables so that they were easily accessible should something go wrong. One mistake that I made when I was doing this was not drilling the holes big enough for the light cables, so I ended up having to cut off the end of the cable, cut off the outlet completely, and rewire a plug end back onto the end of the light. So that was something that I'll carry with me, is always drill your holes big enough for whatever cable management situation you have going on. After the electronics were mostly in place, I started testing everything. I tested the lights and the speakers to make sure that everything was working before it all got covered up with the plastic and eventually the entirety of the structure. I've learned that building in modularity into my pieces so that I can access parts if they break is a really important part of how I like to design my installations, and especially these sound-based installations as I move forward. I was always interested in sound art from my time in undergraduate art school. I took some new media classes, and some of my professors were very influential to me at the time and really taught me about this long history of sound art and what it means to really use sound as a medium for fine art. I have interpreted that over the years to really use sound as a visual and sculptural medium, one that can be seen just as much as it is heard and felt. I'm really drawn to art that deals with sensory experience and how we all maneuver through the world with our senses and our perceptions, and how these subtleties in our day-to-day lives are truly something that goes overlooked but is really important to our experience in the world and our understanding and meaning that we're able to get out of our situations in life. So that's one of the reasons I'm really interested in sound as an art medium and something that inspired this portal piece. Another thing that came after I built the first version of Portal was an understanding of where it had come from within my personal life. I usually don't create art with a particular narrative in mind. It kind of just comes through me. It's what has to be created. For this particular piece, I have always been interested in this idea of reflectivity, this idea of an infinity room. I have always been inspired by the Yayoi Kusama infinity rooms and this kind of translation of physical space into something that is real and not real at the same time. After I built Portal, I started to think about the ways that it resembled some of my experiences growing up in the LDS or Mormon church. As a child, I did grow up in the church, and I have left. I left when I was a teenager, but a lot of those experiences and the trauma that was caused from me leaving the church was a really influential part of my life and my adolescence and young adulthood, and it's also been an influential part of my art practice. In Mormonism, there is this idea that once you are married in the temple and sealed to your spouse, you will be together with your family for time and all eternity. When two people get married, there are these mirrors on either side of the couple, and they can see each other reflected infinitely in those parallel mirror planes. This idea that eternity can only be there for people who fit a certain mold and kind of are perfect in the way that the Mormon Church wants you to be perfect, knowing that only if you achieve that level of perfection are you granted this eternal life with your family. This work, I think, is kind of an indirect reflection of that experience, of that abstraction of eternity, this abstraction of oneself, of this idea of perfection. There's something about standing in the middle of this piece and just feeling the waves around you and seeing fragments of yourself reflected all across the room, yet, you can't really capture or hold on to any of those fragments. There's something about that feeling that drew me to create this work and continue iterating on the work. Not all of these conceptual connections were necessarily there when I originally made Portal. It all kind of came to me after, months of sitting on the finished piece and observing it and looking at documentation and really trying to understand what the work meant to me as an artist and to me as a person. And sometimes that's not necessarily apparent at the beginning of the piece, but once it's said and done and once you're able to put it into the world, you can start to then interact with it and understand maybe more of what it means. I had an excellent opportunity to show Portal in a group show with another artist named Rachel Jump. She's an incredible photographer. I'll link her work down below. You should absolutely go check it out. And we had an incredible reception for the show. The show title was called Counterpart, where a lot of people from the community came out and were able to talk to us and experience the work. And it was really, really special. So shout out to Rachel. Definitely go give her a like and a follow. Overall, I was ecstatic about how Portal 2 turned out. There was a lot of exciting things to me about the panels being open from both sides and really being able to see that reflection from any direction that you walked of that vibrating mylar. The mylar to me kind of felt like a standing wave, like a vertical wall of water. The material is super exciting to me, and I love the abstractions that it creates of one's own reflection and of the gallery around it. Another exciting part of the finished work is how the lighting changes from day to night. In the day, the piece is really light and ethereal and kind of seems like a mirage floating in midair. And then at night, the contrast really comes out and the reflections become a lot more vibrant, and the movement on the panels really starts to dance and play in those pink lights. I really love seeing that transition from day to night, and that's just one more thing that I'm excited to explore with future sound works. Thanks so much for hanging out with me as I talk about my latest sound art piece. If you want to see more videos like this, drop a like or a comment, and if you would be so kind, hit the subscribe button. I love to see this small community of creatives growing. Stay tuned for a new video next week, and in the meantime, stay safe, make beautiful things, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye! It is the end of the second take because the first one had garbly audio.